this show was not written as a piece of musical theatre. I think that's the most important thing to realise. I reckon a lot of you might know that already, because actually it was America that launched this show as an album. It was an idea that my father had, and he wrote it with Andrew Lloyd Webber, but it was written as an album. They couldn't get it on as a piece of theatre anywhere. No one wanted to touch it. They hadn't had a hit under their belt yet. They'd written Joseph the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, but it was still 3 years away from its first professional production, so they were completely unknown. And they had a crazy idea about a musical based on the last week in the life of Christ seen through the eyes of Judas Iscariot. Surprise, surprise, they couldn't get a producer interested, but they did get a record company interested, MCA Records. And it was just at the time when the album was sort of taking over from the single as the definitive art form of popular music and of rock music. And they got enough money to do this fantastic album and threw everything at it. And they didn't have to think about staging, about directing, about scenery, about directors getting in the way, not even a book. So that's why it's the beast it is. They wrote Superstar, the song, first, actually. That's why that song feels a little bit different. It kind of is a little bit outside of the narrative arc of the whole story. But that was released as a single, and it kind of didn't do very much in the UK. But the album took off in America, big time. It was a huge and very, very rapid hit, and radio shows were playing it the entirety from end to end at the time, which really wasn't possible in the UK. There were many more restrictions on radio, so it became a huge hit here, and suddenly everybody wanted to put it on. And so that's why it landed on Broadway first. But it had already kind of proved itself as an album before it proved itself as a show. And in fact, Robert Stigler, who ultimately managed them and the project, spent the first year trying to close down bootleg productions that were springing up all over the whole of North America. So it had a strange genesis. On Broadway, it didn't quite work first time round. My dad tells very funny stories about the primitive radio mics sort of picking up orders for cabs on Madison and Park and stuff like that. And it's interesting that it didn't quite work. It was almost like a bit too far ahead of its time. I think there are other shows that it's got some of the DNA from, like Hair in particular. But there are also a few moments of, that are quite Rodgers and Hammerstein in it, I think, that are really gorgeous bits of musical theatre as well that we can lean into. But I guess what I'm saying is we can leave a lot of our musical theatre training at the door, maybe, and lean into our rock and our pop, and seeing it all as a single piece as well. I think it's quite important for us. So that's kind of the origins of the show, and actually to bring it fully up to date, the irony was that it was a huge theatrical hit in London. So the British perspective of this show is that it's a piece of musical theatre. The American perspective is that it's kind of a rock album. And I think you guys are right. I think it's ultimately a rock album. And we're going to present this as a rock album piece of theatre.